Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Accept meeting minutes.
That's my orange one.
I think we had,
We have a list in here.
yeah, first one on the line is November 14th, 2012. I think Mike went.
We went over these.
Yeah, Mike went through them too, and he said he was fine. I think I had some changes. Did he present those to you?
I did not hear from him.
Yeah, I think it's something on there sitting here.
I have a couple of non-substantive, but formatting changes, if that's okay with you, Mary.
We'll start with November 14th.
November 14th on mine. On the first page is the Title V hearing, and then you go over onto the second page and you go right into the wind turbine issue. I would put a heading there,
Okay,
okay? And maybe, you know, I don't know if you need to put in the time because we were probably actually right on time for that. But put in wind turbines or something like that, so you know that we're going in there. And then throughout, not that many times, but you, in the, about 3/4 of the way down, the paragraph starting with Mr. Dean, stated the wind rose, R-O-W-S, I think should be R-O-S-E.
oh, right.
Valentine's Day.
That's when spell check doesn't help you.
Yeah.
On the third page in the last paragraph, a couple of places you have cited C-I-T-E-D.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's those,
I know.
I apologize.
That's okay. Well, and maybe you fixed it, but I'm looking at an old draft too. So that, and that's also on the fourth page as well.
Okay,
And then at the bottom of the fourth page, I think we talked about this the last time, because I had a different pen color here. Franklin stated, and I said suggested instead. And
okay,
then
that's.
we would, and I would put in the Board of Health instead of we would.
Okay,
And I just wanted to make sure that you had in the second to last paragraph on the last page, adding for nighttime hours. You put that in
yeah,
it? Okay.
yeah, and I got that suggested thing in there too, so I must not have updated.
They've got a different draft.
I apologize.
No, not your fault. Okay, what's the next?
Take a motion
Oh,
to
yeah,
accept.
move to accept the minutes of November 14th as amended.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Move on to acceptance of meeting minutes, December 3rd, 2012.
Okay, on the second page, the easy one first, in the middle, there's a paragraph that starts with Mr. Vaza responded. You see that? You have the sentence, then fourth line down, the minutes will also have to be recorded. Yeah, that same sentence in there twice.
Okay,
I don't care which one you take out. Then the second to last paragraph. It says, Mr. Lynch stated it didn't matter that the Board of Health was not consulted. I would add to the end of that sentence, because there was no statute or regulation providing for a BOH Board of Health permit, providing for. And then in parentheses, actually probably before the period, CDEP letter, close parentheses, period. That was it. Move, accept the minutes of December 3rd, 2012 as amended.
Second. All those in favor? Moving along to acceptance of meeting minutes, December 19th.
Now, that was an executive session, so I don't think
Yeah,
it's appropriate to discuss that here.
Exactly.
I did have a change or two on that one, so we can, next time we go into executive session, we can deal with that one.
Okay.
Acceptance of meeting minutes, January 7th, 2013.
Second page, second to last paragraph. Mr. Lynch felt we could. Why is it always the Mr. Lynch ones I'm changing? Mr. Lynch felt we should. That's the only change I have.
Motion?
Actually. No, there was one, second to last, at the very end, it's actually the sentence that carries over from page 2 to page 3. There's a discussion here from Mr. Dean talking about doing a noise study, and then Mr. Dean added he was disappointed that residents want to get involved with an independent engineer. I'm not sure he said that, and I'm not sure what it was that you wanted to say.
Okay.
I would just strike the sentence.
Strike that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, for the record, they both wanted an independent engineer, they just can't agree on who it is. So subject to those changes, I move to, unless you have any changes, move to adopt the minutes as amended for January 7th, 2012.
Second. All those in favor? Aye.
With a minute to spare.
A minute to stay. We have some stuff. We'll hold for the minute. All right, 7:10 PM, public hearing, FDA tobacco sales violation, CVS and Scituate Shell. CVS? Yes.
Yeah.
Scituate Shell, anybody here from Scituate Shell?
He said he was coming.
All right, let's deal with
Let's go see, yeah.
Sure, sure.
Come on up, please. And just identify yourself.
For the record.
My name's Derek Meach. I'm the store manager at the Scituate Harbor CVS Pharmacy.
Just wanted to know what happened, what was the procedure and
What,
the tobacco?
the whole scenario, how it all played out?
Yeah.
Well, I was informed, I got a letter from the FDA saying that we had sold tobacco to a minor. So what we did was, our policy normally is to go back, look at the transaction. But when the FDA sent the paperwork, there was no specific time, like they didn't have the receipt, right? Because normally when the state finds you, they present you with all the, they give you the receipt, they'll have everything on there that you need. Well, the FDA didn't present, they said around 2 o'clock. was when the employee sold it. Well, I had multiple cashiers on, right? And multiple people bought 2 different transactions that had cigarettes in them. So there was no way for us to determine who it was, because they didn't say he or she, right? That would even help because there was a guy and a girl on the register. So I told my boss about it, and he said that he would forward it up to HR to see where we go. They contacted the FDA. They took care of all the paperwork. I gave you guys the letter the last time I was here, and we're still looking to hear back from the FDA to see if they can present us with a physical receipt so we can narrow it down. Everyone in the store has been retrained since.
Is that through a state retraining?
No, it's when you first get hired by CVS, you go to a NCO class, which is a new colleague orientation, where they break down all the rules and regulations. Pretty much it tells you if you get caught selling cigarettes to a minor, you're gonna get terminated. So we have a module, we have our own web-based training. Everybody had to retake the web-based training in the store and be refreshed. We also talked to the 2 individuals that were there on that evening, and just warned them to be careful because one of them sold cigarettes to a minor. We just didn't know which one.
And they may not have known either.
Correct, yeah.
What, do you require anybody who looks remotely younger than me?
The policy is, I don't think it's Massachusetts policy, but we card anybody under 27, like that sticker's on the door. And that's the, yeah, the sticker's on the door that when you first come in, it says, we card anyone under the age of 27. But that's as strict as the policy.
Yeah, and part of that too is, we used to have funding from the state
Yeah.
for testing, and that has since gone, and I think this board is working with other towns to bring that back, and that's kind of as a warning that there could be other testing done at some time in the near future besides the FDA.
Yeah.
And our policy, I think normally in the past, first time is usually a warning of what you're getting now.
Yeah.
Second offense can be a $50 fine and time where you're not gonna sell cigarettes.
Okay.
And I think in the past, we've gone up to 10 days for pulling a license.
Okay.
And it's usually been over school vacations and stuff like that, and I think the fine was $100, so, you know, we don't like to go that way,
Yeah.
but when.
Oh, no, you gotta do what you got. I mean, it's, yeah, no, it makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we just don't want cigarettes sold to minors.
No, yeah, neither do I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So that's, I just hope.
I don't know how they can afford them, but,
Who, minors?
yeah.
Well, see, I don't know, like, if you're gonna have a minor come in and buy cigarettes, see, I don't know if I don't know how it's, like, sometimes the state has a minor go in and buy cigarettes, so I don't know if they give them the money, I don't know how it all works.
Well, they
I
have
have a big
documented
memory
CC
there,
there.
that was one of the ones that we caught in the way back, right? Probably before your time.
Probably.
Yeah, I think you've had more than one violation at that store. I don't think it was consecutive, so that you would develop multiple,
You mean in the same year?
no,
Oh, okay,
um,
just in the past.
yeah.
Okay.
And,
They might test like 3 times a year
Yeah.
or twice a year, and we had some places that were repeatedly,
Gotcha.
every time there was
You
a
know,
sting, so to say.
Yeah, they got hit.
Yeah,
we have a structure of penalty that if you are caught X number of times in a certain time frame,
Mhm.
it escalates the penalty.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's something we want to avoid.
Yep,
It's something you want to avoid.
it is.
And, you know, and then, you know, we'll save a few trees because it'll be a lot less paper.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I don't think the evidence is enough in this case for us to find a violation since the FDA didn't document it, and we had no involvement with it. But since we got the information, I
Yep.
guess an informal warning, which is what this is
Yep.
what you consider this, and hopefully we don't see it ever again.
Okay, I hope not either.
yeah. At least
At
on this
least-
level.
Yes. I might see you in the store.
Maybe.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you for coming in.
No problem.
and,
Sorry about being tardy last time.
But I'm sure watch it back
Yeah.
twice, so consider that punishment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
And Scituate Shell, there's still nobody here, I don't know. how you wanna, deal with that, if we wanna put him on the agenda for another night, or?
I think we should.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the one that had the worst penalty at all that we ever gave, was that place.
That's right, they were closed, I believe, a few times for school vacations.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't, you know,
The same owner?
I have no idea, but, I will go down and personally see somebody and try and get him in on the next meeting.
Yeah, well, the agenda's definitely a slot open for him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you read the Globe this weekend, but there was a whole write-up on Westwood increasing their regulations. There's also something in, it may have been a ledger about a hookah bar in Plymouth. Those aren't advisable either, for various reasons. So I may be proposing some changes, make things a little stricter. Because there's some new marketing strategies towards youth now with some of the tobacco products that, you know, I think it might be a good idea for us to put regulations on.
Okay. Be all ears.
Yeah, well, it's down the road a ways, obviously.
Yeah.
The piles are getting higher.
Well, we've got a few minutes before our next item on the agenda. Jeff, you wanna spend
Sure.
we've got, other business and, whatever you think might fill up a 6-7 minute span,
Okay,
start wherever you want.
storm report. Yeah, it was a unbelievable experience. The Friday before the storm, we met and set up the shelter around, starting at 4:30 at night. By midnight, I think we only had one person who, at some point in the night, left again. I think he went home to either feed the dog or put the heat on or get the water running, I couldn't remember which. He did show up later in the weekend, however. Since he never signed out, I suppose he was fine, he still had a place. We started getting, people in somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning. We also had the power go off at 9:30.
It's about 9 o'clock over in my section of town, yeah.
And when the power went off, so did the heat.
You mean at the shelter?
Yes.
Yeah.
But not fun. I mean, George Sullivan, the janitor, who was terrific over there, did his best, but he couldn't find it, so finally, early in the morning, we called the boiler guys in, and they jury-rigged it for us in the cafeteria, and then George had been on, I think, a double shift, so he switched off, and Chris Sagittella came in, and he's also a cook, amateur, but that was good because we had people who were hungry, and he cooked us breakfast, and the food service director had gone over what was available, so it was great. First people we got were mostly flooded areas that were being removed. Then everyone, we didn't have a lot of staff. We got more staff later on because I knew with the cases that were coming in, especially if they were gonna need a medical attention, we were gonna need more medical staff. So, when we lost the power, we also lost the ability for television, because it's high school and gets 2 channels, otherwise they have to pay for channels. So they only get 2 channels, so the way we were getting television is we were streaming it off the computer. And once the power went down, the computer went down, the internet went down, all that went down. And at some point, the chief and I both have AT&T phones. That went down. So every time I needed a phone, I had to find somebody with a Verizon phone. And I don't know what he's doing, but at least he has radio. So that has made it a little challenging trying to get things done. Fortunately, we had officers from the police station there, and a lot of them had Verizon phones. So I made very close friends with a few of those guys. Where'd he go? Where'd he go? We have terrific volunteers. When the driving ban got lifted, a lot of people left because while they were waiting, they made arrangements with family or friends. But getting out in the middle of the night, wasn't exactly the time to call them. So the food service director came in, and we had 3 square a day. The food was terrific. He was there for a while. Then he had the kitchen crew come in. Then he came back, and mostly for the dinner meals. We probably had a maximum overnight of maybe around 160. We probably have more than that during the day there because people were coming in to visit, people coming in to get warm, people coming in for a hot cup of coffee or a hot meal or charge their cell phones. Later on when we got hot water, they were coming in for showers. In some cases, family members didn't have power, but when they got power back, they would come and get their family. So, that would happen, or somebody found out a friend was there and they'd pick them up, take them home with them, whatever. So there was a big turnover, but we had an unexpected, I would say, challenging elderly population with medical concerns, and we had a cardiac arrest at registration one night. That has a successful outcome. They did CPR. 911 took him to the hospital. He was complaining on the trip, as I heard from the fireman later. We had a couple of seniors fall off their seats at breakfast. They're kind of a little slippery there, and they lost their balance a little. And then we had a case of seizures where we 911 off to the hospital. And we had a high blood sugar off to the hospital. He came back the next day. So he was a,
Did they not have any medicine with them, or?
we had a big problem in the beginning where people were coming without medicine. Then we had to either send them back or the cops back or the 2 of them back to get the medicine. And finally we told the police, don't let them in the car until they got their medicine.
Yeah, that's almost good briefing when you guys brief for the
Yes, we haven't had a
first responders to.
Yeah, we haven't had a
mention that.
debriefing yet, and I'm quite frankly looking forward to it because I've been making lists. And but I want to hear the nurses' concern. I know that we could have used more medical staff at night because it was a very busy time for some people who needed to go to the bathroom but needed assistance to go to the bathroom. We needed to be a little bit better with our shifts in terms of making sure certain people got rest because certain people didn't get rest. I wasn't one of them. So one night I had to go home because, otherwise I was going to be not worth being there. I would say we probably served maybe 200 to 300 people at the max, and we had over 60 dogs. We had several cats. We had a guinea pig and a dragon lizard, and all the people and all the pets were very well behaved. So we didn't keep all the pets there. Some went to the shelter. Some smaller ones stayed in their containers with their owners, and they'd take them out for walks and whatever. And then some, we had 2 Newfoundlanders come in, followed by 2 German Shepherds, and our backup kennel got those. She called to see if there was anything we could do to help. We go, oh yes, there is.
Yeah.
So we opened at 6 o'clock on Friday. We finally got either placed or got people home by 6:30 on Tuesday night. I was driving and I had slipped on the black ice coming in Tuesday morning, and they wanted to track me off to the hospital first. I said, no, I gotta work, just put some ice packs on. which I did, and that's fine later, but I tried to go at the end of the day, and the chief said he'd cover, except I've pulled out of the parking place, and I'm starting to turn to go down the road towards 3A. He goes, just a minute, they just called in a fire. Could you wait a minute? So I wait a minute. He says, I think I gotta go to this one, can you stay? And I said, sure. So I got the X-ray the next day, which is negative, but it's still bothering me. And then, that was over. Now we switch into cleanup mode. So I'm dealing mostly with a list of maybe 10 places in Humrock that I've storm inspected, and they're gonna have to do some fixing or inspecting. And then I'm worried about the northern part of Glades, past the condos. We went out there, Patrick, conservation agent, I introduced him to that area. He's sitting there. And then all the sand was gone, it was all rocks, and there was some errant pipes sticking up. But there was a couple of the innovative systems we've done with small walls around that were fine, which was really great. But since I really don't have a handle on what's out there and where it is or was, we're gonna do the abbreviated storm Title V inspections out there. And I've already gone over it with one of the beach association representatives there. He's given me a list of the addresses and the contacts. And, you know, we'll probably give him about 60 days to get it done. And the idea is, you know, find out if it's something you can claim, you need to know about it. Also, if it's something needs fixing, you really want to get done before the good time of the year, so.
And those inspections, we're gonna do them like we did before, where we're not looking for groundwater table or anything, we're just looking for broken pipes and major damage
Yeah,
to the system.
and to know where stuff
So
is.
it's a Title V inspection, but not an official Title
No,
V
it's
inspection.
what I call a storm abbreviated Title V.
Okay.
So that will give us better information. It also gives information about how storms affect those systems there, so we'll have a better idea of that too, because we really haven't in the past, because by the time we got finished with Humrock last year, we went back there and they paved all the sand over it, we couldn't see anything.
It's too bad they couldn't approve the old pits.
No, let's get away from that.
Put them deep in the ground.
Yeah, well, the deep in the ground means deep in the water, and that doesn't work anymore. So that's, you know, the chief's talked about an after-action report. Mary and I have been working on a thank you letter to the Mariner for all our wonderful volunteers. I mean, they were so absolutely terrific. They not only knew what they were doing, they were helpful and they were caring, and we got a whole lot of thank yous as people were leaving and things like that, because, I mean, you know, I was very grateful and amazed and proud of what Scituate does to take care of Scituate. Because when all the power went down, it was difficult. It was very difficult. So
Is there a generator there?
there's a generator there, but there's one or two problems. I've heard it both ways, and I'm not sure which is the accurate way. One is that only half the circuits are connected to the generator. And one of the circuits may not be the part that blows the heat around. The other one I've heard is there's a computer-generated temperature control, and it reverted into weekend temperature control, and that's what made it cold because the temperature went down. So, I don't know yet.
Obviously, that's one of the items.
Yeah, we have to talk to the boiler guys, but we also have to talk to the IT guy to figure out which is which. So, you know, the IT guy eventually came in, the boiler guys came in again when the power went back on, and then the computer did override the jury rigging we did. Because at that point, when we got more people the second night, we had to put them in the library. And it looked like OSHA paradise in there. We had extension cords going like this through there. We had one of our special needs homes evacuated because of no heating came in, and we put them all together there with their people. And it was a quieter area because we didn't allow any of the pets in there because of the carpet. So and there was a kitten there named Blizzard. It was a new acquisition that needed a name, and that's the name it got, so.
And how did, you mentioned mining, you mentioned Humrock, how did Peggy in Egypt and some of the other beaches fare?
I didn't
Title
really,
V, let's say.
I didn't really look at the beaches so much because, the Egypt area's on sewer. I did Surfside, they looked okay, which was good, but a lot of those have been repaired, and of course, they're on the inward side, protected somewhat by the houses, as opposed to up on the Minot and Glade side, where they're just getting it straight on.
I think we have some pending anyways at Peggy, so.
Yes, we'll be discussing them later tonight.
All right. Well, Jennifer, thank you for the storm report. Appreciate that. And we will move along to 7:25 PM, Scituate wind turbine discussion continued. First on the agenda is Ms. Tanya Travisani, attorney representing the McKeith family, to present new information from recent studies on wind turbines and health effects to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your time this evening. Just as a procedural matter, I wanted to request that the letter that was dated January 28th and the materials that were submitted in preparation for that Board of Health meeting be included in the record this evening. Those materials were provided to give you an opportunity to review them, to have a thoughtful discussion about those, since it is new evidence that's come to light since the DEP study in 2012.
Do you have those, Karen?
No, you were giving them the last.
I know, but I'm making sure you got them for the.
Oh, yeah, we got
Oh,
them.
yeah.
All right.
I mean,
Double checking, that's
we
all.
both have them on our email, so we're good.
I think I put the copies in your folder.
Yeah, I've got them, I have them on the computer too, but I'm making sure
Yeah,
the
we-
office has got one.
Oh, yeah, we got them.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
all right.
have you had an opportunity to review them?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, okay, good. Also for the record, there was a DVD copy of a video that was taken on December 15th by Lauren McKeever of a Shadow Flicker event. That was submitted at the last Board of Health meeting as well, so we have that for the record. Additionally, there was an email correspondence from my office on February 21st, which includes a decision from the Supreme Court of Nevada, which permanently enjoined the construction of a 75-foot tall wind turbine in a residential area because they considered it a nuisance. Finally, for the record, the most recent series of complaints which were filed by Lauren McKeever were submitted by email, I believe, last week, and we'd like those included in the record of tonight's meeting as well.
Do you have those, Jennifer?
Yeah, they're on the computer.
Okay, thank you.
Jen.
So, because I didn't have an opportunity to speak at the last Board of Health meeting, I have 6 points of discussion for tonight, so I beg your indulgence in allowing me to get through these so that we can talk about them. The first thing was Judge Healy's decision and order of the McKeever's appeal of the Board of Health's November 2012 decision. The second thing, and if you want me to go through these in time,
Why don't you just go, makes sense to do.
just
one-
do it one at
talk
a time?
Talk
Okay,
about it.
we'll talk about it, okay.
And then move on. Probably.
So that was included as Exhibit C in the packet that was given to you. And the reason I'm bringing that specifically to your attention is that the Board of Health was stated, Judge Healy specifically stated the Board of Health is the local governmental body with primary jurisdiction over this matter, and specifically cited to General Laws, Chapter 111, Section 122, 123, and 143 as the bases for the board's authority to examine nuisances and activities that are harmful to the public health, and to order the removal or relocation of the nuisance or activity. And the reason that I wanted to stress that and felt compelled to do so is because at a previous board meeting, Mr. Lynch had referred to General Laws Chapter 111, Section 122 as being antiquated and wasn't sure if it was actually applicable anymore. So we have the ruling from the court there and the guidance.
So you're not saying that Judge Healy in his decision made a ruling that that law applied to this situation or the wind turbines.
He
just cited.
he specifically said that the board was authorized to act under that statute. So you have the authority to act under that
I read the
statute.
decision.
Okay. All right. By way of the decision in order, the court also verified that the board remains empowered and is in fact statutorily obligated to abate the existing nuisance and threat to the health of the McKeevers that's being caused by the operation of the wind turbine. In accord with the court's decision and order, the McKeevers will continue to participate in the proceedings of the board as the board continues to deliberate over the process. As you will recall, the court didn't issue a final decision because it felt that the board was in the process of making a determination as to whether it constituted a nuisance. And we're back before the board to participate in the proceedings to determine whether or not it is in fact a nuisance. And we, the McKeevers and the community members, have at all times been arguing that it is a nuisance. So for the first point of discussion, I wanted to see how the board was reacting to the court's decision, if you will, and how, in fact, you would construe a nuisance to be, in fact, a nuisance.
I think, the way I look at it is, what said to carry on is we're carrying on, and we're looking for post-construction study. And I'm still firm with that. I don't know much to add to that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it's our role to answer or cross-examination, be cross-examined by you here, but I read the decision. As you know, I'm an attorney, and you know, I agree with Mr. Clark that the judge said proceed on. Nothing really was decided. And that was the essence of the ruling. And also, there's never been any question in the board's mind about what our authority is. This board's been doing health issues for many years, and we're very familiar with all of the statutes that give us power.
Okay, well, I think what the question is then is what is considered a nuisance if upwards of 3 hours of shadow flicker isn't considered a nuisance?
Well, is point number 2 the Nevada decision?
Oh, we're getting into that
Okay.
too, if you wanna segue
So,
into that.
Yes, well, we might as well cover kill as many birds as we can
Sure.
here. So I read, obviously there's not much out there, and you've been diligently paying attention to the case law. And I applaud you for that, and finding the Nevada Supreme Court recent decision was an interesting ruling. However, you gotta, I think, look at it, or at least that's the way I look at it, and you could disagree with me, because that's how I learn sometimes. The noise health impact part of the decision was only a piece, and actually a very small piece of that decision as I read it. And the law of nuisance is a very broad thing, and it's not the Board of Health's job, I don't think, to find whether the turbine is a nuisance in the broad sense, but only in the health sense, as I read what it is that we're authorized to do. For example, the court talks for a couple of pages about diminution of property value. That's none of this board's business. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So I thought it was an interesting decision, and certainly, you know, a win for the people who are concerned about wind turbines and the siting of wind turbines, but I didn't really see that decision as a ringing endorsement that there is definitively a public health effect, both because it was a private turbine and because it was a turbine that hadn't been built yet. In other words, it was before the siting decision.
Correct, they
had been
did a
made.
site visit
Yeah.
of a comparable wind turbine,
Yeah.
and that's what was of particular interest to me, because the court did cite, the turbine that they went to visit was only 75 feet tall, and they couldn't believe the enormity of it at 75 feet tall. And that's what struck me as particularly poignant, because we're talking about a 400-plus foot tall industrial wind turbine 600 feet from a residence, not just a
And so
private.
that, a good point, and the judge obviously was impressed by that point as well, out in Nevada. But that segues into the conversation you and I didn't get to have the last time about your client entering into a deal with Scituate Wind, to not oppose the siting of this turbine, which it knew, your clients must have known just by looking at the plan, how big this thing was gonna be.
It was
I had
never
no idea how
disclosed
big it
how,
was.
it was never disclosed how big this was gonna be, and that's part of the problem, is the testing that was provided by Scituate Wind and part of the permitting process, which my clients had agreed not to contest during the permitting process. There was faulty evidence provided to the town, and it's not, those tests that were provided never indicated the level of noise that would be produced, and they never indicated the level of shadow flicker that was going to be produced, okay?
Well, that's a different question than I was, so first we were talking about the size of the turbine, okay?
Well, they go hand in hand. The noise goes in line with the size and the flicker.
Did they fly balloons or something at one
They
point?
did.
That's what I thought, they had something there for about a week or 10 days or something that would give the idea
Of how high it was.
of how high it was, yeah.
It wasn't a balloon, it was some staging that was set up, there was no balloons there.
I saw the balloon.
Hmm.
Well, anyway, to your point, Mr. Lynch, about the McKeevers entering into this contract with Scituate Wind. Regardless of any contract that may have been entered into, that was in fact with respect to permitting, and the town, the Board of Health, the Board of Selectmen cannot contract away its statutory obligation to protect the health and safety of its citizens. It's a police power. The Supreme Judicial Court has long held, since even before the 1930s, that you cannot contract away that power. And, by the way, the town wasn't a party to that contract.
And, you know, we pointed out before, we're not the town, right, we're the Board of Health for the town, so we're not the town. Again, there's different entities that need to be involved here. And the question that I had for you about the size of the turbine and the contention that you made that information was not disclosed to you or your clients at the time that the permitting process was taking place, you suggest to me that you have an argument with someone other than the Board of Health. The agreement that I read says that your client is agreeable to the, in effect, and I'm paraphrasing it, and I, you know, obviously you will and everybody will stand by the language of the agreement itself, but in effect it says, we won't oppose the siting or operation of this turbine as long as
Actually,
it.
it specifically says commencement of the
Yeah,
operation.
interesting language, I thought, yeah.
Yes, that was quabbled over quite a bit, and
Well, I wasn't there for that.
I know.
I wasn't sure what that
I
meant.
realize
But the point being that if the permitting, if there was some sort of misrepresentation or whatever you wanna call it that goes into the permitting process, that you felt that you were misled, or your clients were misled, that's a different issue. Because the agreement says, in effect, that we're gonna live with this turbine as long as it's in compliance with state law and state regulations, including the noise regulations,
well,
presumably.
I respectfully disagree with that, and regardless of the agreement or the permit, quite frankly, it's irrelevant to why we're before the Board of Health, which goes back to the fact that both of the McKeevers and their children have been sick since this wind turbine became operational. Most recently, I mean, the family's been submitting complaints to the Board of Health on an almost weekly basis since the fall, when we first brought this petition before the board.
I called the fire department when the waste was in flames, and if I didn't call, who knows how much of that landfill would have been gone up in flames.
I don't think the board is aware of.
Yeah, I
the
go,
fire.
we were woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I looked out my window, and a huge section of
The compost
of
pile
the
was on
compost
fire.
pile was in probably 20 feet, shooting 20-foot flames up in the air.
Was that over at the
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if I didn't call, you know, it was like 2:30 or maybe 2:45 in the morning, you know, an extra 3 hours of burning could have caused some serious issues over there, whether or not equipment could have gotten damaged or whatever, you know. You know, I obviously had to do the right thing and call, but that could have been a disaster on our hands.
Just as an interested bystander from a public health and safety perspective, why is the Board of Health terribly fussed about an agreement?
Stop, please.
One at a time, anyway.
Yeah, one at a time, yeah, please.
That's more polite, thank you.
With respect to what Mr. McKeever, the fire he was just talking about, I understood that it took till almost 5 p.m. the following day to put out the flames, and then they actually reignited again that evening. So there were some serious issues over there at that time, that we wanted to make the Board of Health aware of as well. Turbine wasn't impacted at that point, which is good, but.
Sounds like an issue for the fire department to make with
It's not the first time it's had a problem.
compost piles do that.
Yeah. That's the MWRA.
Well, if you'd like me to move on to the
Sure.
next
Sure.
topic, the recent scientific reports regarding negative health effects which are attributable to wind turbines sited close to residential areas, those reports have been released after the Mass DEP report, to which the Board of Health has been relying to date, which was from January 12th. Notwithstanding these reports, which I'll get into in a minute, the DEP report from January 2012, did actually state that it's possible that cognitive and mood complaints and other medical and psychological issues associated with sleep loss can stem from living in immediate proximity to wind turbines if the turbines disrupt sleep. Every complaint that the McKeevers had submitted to the Board of Health has included the complaints of sleep disruption. They're not making this up. It is affecting their health. It is affecting their sleep. They continue to suffer from all of the symptoms which we cited in the beginning, which included the headaches, the nausea, the vertigo, the anxiety.
Did you get a chance to see Mr. Dean's letter? I don't know, did you send that to them? No, okay. Well, we should get a copy for you. But I guess the one point he made in the letter, which I noticed as well too, the two studies that you cite, these are republications of earlier studies that were discussed in the DPH study.
Well, the DEP's report was also a discussion of previous studies. It wasn't a peer-reviewed study. So they've
Oh, I
gone
understand.
back to review these studies. And the Ambrose Rand study was actually concluded in, the decision was concluded and issued in 2012. So the study was ongoing. It was regarding 2 industrial wind turbines which were operating fountains
yeah, I
since
read it.
2010. Okay, you read it, all right. And then the second one was Exhibit B to the packet that was submitted at the last Board of Health meeting, was the Nissenbaum Aramini Hanning study, which concluded that those that were living further away from the wind turbines between 3.3 kilometers and 6.6 kilometers were not suffering to the same extent as those who were living between 375 meters and 1,400 meters from the wind turbines. So the results of both of those experiments confirm that wind turbines can and do harm humans if placed too close to residential areas. As a practical matter, the most recent scientific studies demonstrate that the Board of Health's debate shouldn't be simplified to one about whether the wind turbine could or can cause harm to the McKeevers, because the most recent scientific evidence proves that the wind turbines can in fact cause harm to humans if they're placed too close to the residences. in this case, with the McKeevers, 640 feet from the residence. So, query, they didn't have any of these symptoms prior to the operation of the wind turbine. Since the wind turbine became operational, they've experienced sleep deprivation as well as all the other symptoms. And that should be construed as a cause of sickness, I would think.
Well, what these studies both lack, as well as some of the other studies, is any epidemiology that establishes any causation.
Correct.
I mean, isn't that what everybody keeps saying, including the study that you cite, which says we need some epidemiology in this area?
Okay, well, I'm not a doctor, okay? All I see is my clients, and I see their sick kids. They didn't,
We're not making this up, this is not something that is,
Excuse me, one at a time, please.
Well, I'm just putting it for the record, we're not making it up.
Excuse me, sir. You need to be recognized by the chairman or me if I was having a conversation with your attorney, and I don't mean to
I
shut you off,
apologize.
but we want to try and keep it as civil and organized
I'm
as
sorry.
possible. That's okay. Apology accepted. So my point is, I understand your point, and you've made them before about the health effects, but the issue of causation, of medical causation, requires some epidemiology in support of that, doesn't it? And the study that you cite says that there isn't any.
so what do you need from us to show you?
Some epidemiology or a doctor that is.
We've provided doctor's notes to the Board of Health.
Well, we've had this conversation.
We have, but you want the causation, we've provided doctor's documentation. I'm at a loss to understand why the board doesn't see the cause and effect here.
It takes more, and I don't mean this in any way to disparage anybody's complaints because I take them very seriously, but it takes more scientifically for one to make a conclusion on causation than to say A happened and B happened, therefore A must have caused B. And if you read the law, it's very clear on that.
Well, if I may indulge the board and draw an analogy, if instead of a wind turbine, this was actually a factory that went up next door to the McKeevers, okay? And it was properly permitted, there was no dispute about that. But the factory began emitting noxious fumes. And they made people who live nearby sick. I would argue that that would be within the Board of Health's purview to look into and in fact abate that which would be a nuisance or a cause of sickness from that factory.
I'd have to say though, I think those fumes or anything would have to be detected, you know? And that's the process we're in now, so.
Okay, well that's interesting. Which goes to the,
I mean, if it's a flower factory, I mean, you know.
well, those would be considered noxious fumes with all due respect, but
Some people have
back in the original days, when this statute was initially promulgated, there were piggeries, and that was one of the main issues that people had was the smell and the noise from these piggeries. And the courts would declare these piggeries a nuisance, and they would have to be shut down because they were a nuisance, maybe not necessarily a cause of sickness, but a nuisance to the neighboring property owners. And there would be the analogy. Okay, so you have the smell, it might not cause sickness, but it doesn't make people feel good, and it's a nuisance. So you have the nuisance factor and you also have the cause of sickness factor. But you're obligated to look into both and to abate either or.
If there's a relationship.
Right.
If there's a relationship. And that's why we keep going back to the studies that you and I have discussed, and you keep giving more studies, which I don't blame, no, I do exactly the same thing about regulations. But we need to find science there that supports the causal relationship. And the study you gave me even says we need some epidemiology on this.
Okay.
Okay, and that's the, and that's why, I mean, you know, again, I'm not discounting complaints, but we need to, I think I said this in the first hearing that I was at on this, we need to have a reasoned and scientific basis for doing what it is that we do. And I understand you disagree, that's, you know, and that's your right, but, you know, I've read all of these studies, and,
Have the other members of the board read the
well,
studies?
I'm not gonna quiz the other members of the board.
No,
but
I'm
suspect that
really
they can-
concerned for a thoughtful discussion, not just an exchange between you, Mr. Lynch, and me, but for the whole board to be engaged and discuss. I mean, this is the purpose of the public meeting process. So I'm concerned that all members of the board, that they understand the studies, that they've read the studies, that they
I
reviewed the
read through
materials.
everything, I'm
Okay.
just to hold my position, I read it, and you have to respect that.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank you. Back to the nuisance point, that Mr. Lynch made and the cause and effect argument, again, I would argue that the flicker that the McKeevers are still experiencing upwards of over an hour every sunny day, still, it's been happening since the fall till now. That is clearly a nuisance.
And let me, I don't, as you know, I've been troubled by the flicker.
Do we need documentation for that too?
Excuse me, again. If you want to speak, I think the procedure is to ask the board, raise your hand, ask the board, but right now I was answering your attorney's question, okay? And actually, sort of lean on your side on this one. Can the shades be drawn? Maybe,
Not in
you're
the
not,
yard.
maybe your client wants to answer that one.
They can't be drawn in the yard. It's not just the house.
I understand.
It migrates through the entire property. So if they're outside, they have to go inside.
Mhm.
If they're inside,
Right, that's my question, if they're inside.
it comes through every single window. Yes, go ahead.
Why should I have to close my shades when it's sunny out?
Well, you know, that goes back to the question of the siting of the turbines, that's why I asked the question. You know, again, I will say, I've said this before, I am very troubled by the flicker, I consider it, you know, an annoyance. Myself, I wouldn't wanna have that in my yard. Whether it goes beyond an annoyance, though, is, you know, a hard question that I have, and I think that we need to, since Scituate Wind is not funding any study on the flicker, we've sort of put that aside, but it's not over as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I do think that we need to look at the impact of the flicker on people and see whether there's something that can be done about it, and how bad it actually is. You know, that's my view on it, to answer your question, I guess. Okay?
Well, with respect to the flicker piece of it, we've submitted several videotapes and you've seen the evidence, and we've offered to have the board come for a site visit on the property.
I'm still willing to come.
Name the
I
date.
told you that 2 months ago, we should set up something
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
time, but you know the best times, I don't. So, you know, and you gotta give us a little bit of advance warning, I do work in Boston.
And it depends on the weather.
I understand that too,
it's
and,
a tricky-
you know, if you set up a time and then it's raining that day, you know, I'm happy to say, look, we'll come another time. But I don't, you have offered that, and I've accepted your offer, I believe Mr. Clark has as well.
So in light of that, and recognizing that it's hard to get all members of the board present for a site visit on a perfectly sunny day.
That's a tough one though, cause that can, I don't know if we could all show up or not, but,
Well, you
Well,
don't
that's
have to
why
get
we
up.
did, that's why we did the videotape, I mean, that,
Yeah,
so.
no, fair enough, but if you want us to come, we're willing to do it, we don't all have to be there at the same time either, you know. I mean, I'm happy to just get an email a couple of days in advance and say, you know, this might be a good time if you're around, you know.
Well, with the evidence that you have, I mean, you already have the video, we could provide an affidavit if you want to testify that,
I mean, I think the only other issue that potentially could be an issue would be if, you know, if Thursday's a sunny day, Mr. Dean decided to shut the turbine down at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when there's no, when the flicker would come, then it kind of defeats the purpose of gathering everybody
Understood, and
together.
I think I'd be able to see that it wasn't running, so,
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you know, it's been, I don't wanna say better, but it's been off in when it hasn't been windy and, you know, is it still there? Yes. Is it still bad? Horrific. But I'm hoping in the course of the next few weeks that the sun starts to get a little higher in the sky,
Right.
that this flicker is gonna go away very soon.
and that's part of what I think we need to know as to how often this is gonna happen throughout the year, because, you know, we discussed in the past, this really didn't start getting bad until we hit the fall, as I understand it, and so maybe it's not gonna happen as bad all year long, and I'm not saying that doesn't make it better necessarily for those periods when you're there, but, I think that's one thing that we need to figure out, is how often this is gonna happen. Presumably, it's gonna be the same pattern every year, you know, depending on what the weather is, whether there's sunlight, but the sun's always in the same position every year relative to your house and the turf.
would the board be willing to entertain, a motion for an intermittent shutdown during sunny days and the time that shadow flicker is prevalent? Just at least to provide the McKeever some relief from that portion?
I think we've looked at that before, and, while I am troubled by it, I think for the reasons that we've discussed before, I'm not inclined to go down that road again, now, not foreclosing it ever though. I think I need more information. Again, the question is similar to the noise question, and it's a harder one for you, because the science on flicker and adverse health effects is even weaker than what science there is as to the noise.
But
It's
now
certainly an annoyance,
Yes.
I will grant you that, but that's not enough. All the cases are clear about that.
So you wouldn't consider it a nuisance to be equated with an annoyance?
Correct. I think that in a lot of cases you cited says the same thing.
All right. Bear with me a moment. The other point I wanted to bring up was the proposed Massachusetts legislation by one of the state reps in Falmouth to protect residents against the negative health effects caused by the close siting of the residential, or the industrial wind turbines in residential areas. That was filed, let's see, January 16th of 2013, presented by Representative David Vieira, who represents East Falmouth. The act is entitled "An Act Relieving the Adverse Effects of Wind Energy." So other communities and legislators in the Commonwealth have also concluded that there can be adverse health effects associated with turbines, including but not limited to noise and shadow flicker. So that particular legislation is attached as Exhibit E to the packet.
Proposed legislation.
I'm sorry, yes, the proposed legislation, that's correct. I don't believe it's been assigned to committee yet, so it's still pending. So that concludes the 6 points that I had, and I appreciate your time, and allowing me to put what I have forth on the record and to engage in a thoughtful discussion.
Anything else on that? No, good. Next on the line, Mr. Gordon Dean of Scituate Wind to update the status of the RFP for the acoustical wind turbine site.
Sure.
Come on up.
So, Ms. Sullivan doesn't have to crane her neck and look at me. I believe on Friday I sent to the Board of Public Health a draft of the RFP, which the board had asked us to prepare. And I don't know if you had a chance to review it. Any questions, comments?
I did. I've got too many papers.
Yeah, here.
I know I'm marked up. Unmarked one.
You want mine?
Well, I've got an unmarked copy, I just want to look at the copy that I marked up.
Take it a copy.
This number before we go.
Good thing.
This is one we just got.
Green, that's the go-ahead file.
Not the orange folder?
Okay, if you give me a second, I'll look at unmarked copy, and I'm sure I will refresh my memory quickly. Borrow your copy, Tim?
Mhm.
I have extra copies if it'd be helpful.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Here, use that, you need the extra. Thanks.
Apropos do you mind if I
No, go ahead.
proceed, sorry. In the introduction where you say the Board of Health of the town of Scituate, you define it as the town.
Yes.
I make it the board,
Okay.
okay? Thought that I had on section E, which is the timeframes. I've been trying to think about who we send the RFP to, whether we just send it to everybody. One thought that I have, you may think that that's too many people. But I was wondering what your thought was about maybe interviewing the 3 top candidates before we selected one.
We were uncertain when we were drafting this what the process was going to be.
Yeah.
We did it as if Scituate Wind was going to be issuing the RFP as opposed to the
Mhm.
town. In which case we could pick some people to send it to. At our last Board of Health meeting, there was discussion, we presented certain consultants, I think the community group presented certain consultants. I didn't know what the board's plan was on that, if you were going to pick consultants for us to send it to, if we were doing it, I'm assuming if the board, not the town, the board were going to be issuing this, it probably had to be an open RFP.
Right.
Um, But if you wanted to designate certain people for us to send it to, or let us pick people to send it to, you know, I'm looking for some direction and feedback.
And that sort of segues into the other question that I had, which was the guess my thought was that under the permit and under sort of the parameters that we've discussed for the last several months here, my understanding was that it's more efficient, and I think everybody agrees it's more efficient, that Scituate Wind actually enter into the contract, so to speak, because it's paying for it under the permit with the engineering firm, but that whatever you're gonna do is gonna be both in scope and in terms of who's doing it, somebody that the Board of Health has agreed would do it. Presuming you agree as well.
Yes, assuming we both parties agree, yes.
Yeah. So that's how I envisioned what we would have here, that we would both be selecting the contractor.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay.
And that's one of the reasons, excuse me for
Yeah,
interrupting,
go ahead.
it's one of the reasons we broke it down as a pricing proposal and a technical qualification proposal, separate envelopes. I know that's the way towns often do things.
Mhm.
We don't need to do it that way, but that way, if you wanted to, you could just look at the person's qualifications and what they propose, and then invite them in for some interviews, whatever, before you even look at pricing. So those are the, that's why we wrote it this way.
Yeah, and I thought I appreciated that you did it that way, and even whether we have to do it or we don't have to do it, I think it's a good way to do it, because I think we all want to pick out the best qualified person, and you know, with due respect to your company's wallet, it's not I'm not that concerned unless it's completely out of the ballpark about what the price is. I'm assuming they're all gonna be, you know, within reason, shall we say. And, you know, if we happen to pick somebody whose price is 3 times what everybody else was, I'm sure you're gonna have a problem with that, and we need to address it.
Well, and I would encourage the board to invite in 2 or 3 people, interview them. You might get different perspectives than either Scituate Wind or the community group had on this RFP in terms of how they think it should be conducted. And we're willing to consider that. Again, you had 2 non-experts drafting an RFP on doing acoustical studies, so.
So go back to my question, do you think we should send the RFP to everybody?
Define everybody.
Who's listed?
Define everybody.
Your list and
Your list and their
community
list.
list.
We could do that. We've already made known what we think of some of
I understand
our
that.
proponents.
I understand, and they've made their views clear as well.
Right.
But I think that when we look at people's responses, we may be further informed about some of those issues. But I'm willing to whittle it down if your group and the community group wants, you know, the alternative I had was each side pick 3 from the other side's list, and we'll give it to those 6.
Is the steering committee still functioning? It's been dissolved. Has it been officially dissolved, or we just had one party back out?
Well, I mean, we haven't had any meetings since, you know, we believed our charge was to make a recommendation, and that recommendation was made, so we didn't think that,
So it's fulfilled.
yeah, and we had discussed contractors, so because we had both sides composed lists, so we thought that we had fulfilled our purpose,
And
and,
how many were there? 4 from the community group that they proposed for?
there were,
There's 7, 11
Mr.
of them?
Kelly and Mr. Thompson attended, Mr. Jean and Mr. Shaw attended, Michael and I attended.
No, you have to count it contract.
Yeah, how many contractors I could do?
Well, I think,
May I answer?
Go
they
ahead.
had
Sure.
7.
The community group
5.
proposed 4,
Right.
which we said 1 was acceptable to us. And we proposed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, except Epsilon was one of the 6, and they are participating in the Mass CEC study, which is, by the way, underway at this point in Scituate. So that leaves 5, and I don't think the community group accepted any of those 5, so.
Right, so there's 9 total that have been proposed.
And there's one there that you
We
may
have to
accept.
take, we have to take that epsilon out, right?
Right,
Right.
yeah.
So there were 6 total that we had on our list. One of them has said they, if we went ahead with Mass CEC study, which is underway at this point in time, they could not participate.
Okay, so there's 8.
No, that was 6 plus,
6 and 4 minus 1 is 9.
Yeah, all right.
And there's one there that the community group agreed that you'd work with too, so there was one there. Is that the language?
there's one that we agreed we could work with from the communities group list, yes.
Right, so that's,
What was their name again?
Noise control engineering.
okay. That holds some weight.
Yeah, but it may not after we read everything.
Correct, but it,
I mean,
it holds some weight, it's,
it will be read with interest.
Does anybody else out there have some thoughts as to whether we should just send the RFP to everyone or narrow the list down?
I don't think it would hurt to send it to everyone. I mean, it's just paper at this point. I mean, printing a couple extra copies.
Well, it's more work on the other end than have to absorb and read it all. That's the only thought I have.
Mr. Chairman, may I? One thing, when we were talking about the noise testing that's going to be conducted, I wasn't sure if the board was aware that it was recently brought to my attention that Mr. Shaw had done a noise analysis at the McKeever's home over the summer, and I don't think anybody was ever privy to the results of that test.
I've never heard of any testing or anything. I don't know.
Mr. Dean, are you aware of that?
I do know that Mr. Shaw took some sampling. I wouldn't call it a study. He's not an acoustical engineer. He was trying to determine sources of the noise. We were trying to see if there's some way we could help the McKeevers through insulation, or looking at maybe some sound was coming through their vent. That also disappeared with a lawsuit.
Yeah, I don't think it doesn't, we weren't even involved until September as the board, so I have no background or anything on that, none, so.
I'm not sure to what lawsuit Mr. Dean is referring, but
Yeah, that's out of this fourth round too,
I
I think at this
don't
point,
know
yeah.
what that is regarding
Well, it
either.
doesn't sound like it's a scientific study to me
It
Yeah.
doesn't,
anyway, so,
but, well, I don't know what was conducted. It was just brought to my attention that there was some type of an analysis done, and nobody's been privy to that information, and I wanted to bring it to the board's attention, because perhaps it might be helpful in some way.
As I said, Mr. Shaw was trying to work with the McKeevers to understand their complaints, to understand potentially where the noise is coming from. I was not involved directly, I heard about it. It seemed to be coming more through, his thought was through a bathroom vent. And when they closed the door to the bathroom, the noise was not as bad. But communications stopped on that matter. Ms. Trevison eventually sent us a demand letter, which was resolved, and then, of course, sued the town. So that line of communication at Ms. Trevison's request has stopped. We're not allowed to talk to Mr. McKeever.
Well, we've got our test we're doing anyway, so it's before nothing's been presented on that, so
Well, I mean, this will give us, I would think, more reliable information. I'm not sure what he had, but this allows for different conditions too, so.
So the RFP goes out and, well, how long do you think the response time comes
Well,
back?
I had an open schedule in here. I was looking for input from the board, again, not knowing what involvement the board wanted, whether the board wanted to send this out, get other people's comments on it, issue it now, issue it after the next board meeting. I didn't know.
I have a question. Where does it address how many locations you gotta have?
I saw that up in the beginning.
This is, there was one specific sampling situation that the community group had proposed, which was sampling at the a wind speed of 12 to 18 meters per second.
Page 5. Item number 11.
Well, I mean, by number 11, test locations, I mean, geographic sites, and I also mean, ocean side, non-ocean side, and if we could do it, at some point when there's a really high tide, so that we can, the group also said that the noise was amplified, was bouncing off the water at the high tide when the marsh is full. So I was wondering if that was a possibility as well.
Whatever input you would like, sampling both at a high tide and a low tide event? Or
Yeah.
just at the high tide, or which?
Yeah, a higher tide, like 10 and a half, somewhere in there.
I would suggest 11, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
10, 8, 11.
I mean, what excuse me, what you're trying to do is match, given wind speed with a certain tide, and,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. It's
the
in my
more,
mind,
the more
too.
things you try to
Yeah.
match up, the harder it's gonna
Those
be to
tides
find.
last about 5 nights, once per
Maybe
month.
2016 by the time we get to the daytime.
Yeah, well, it's a
No.
good point. I understand what you're saying, absolutely. Yeah, you could have flat wind with lunar tides, and that's a month gone. And
well, I mean, if
It's
you,
trying to hit it, though.
if you at least schedule to try and hit it, I mean, Mother Nature's gonna give us what Mother Nature gives us, but at least if we try and hit the tide, you know, we could try for something. If it's a flat wind, it's a flat wind, that's what it is.
I think that would be on the, excuse me, please, for the record.
My name is Jerry Kelly, and I live at 56 Moorland Road, and I'd like to answer Mr. Lynch's question. I think that it should go out to all 9 of the proposed acoustic engineers. And I would caution the board to look at not only a 2 standard deviation event of somebody who's too high, but somebody who's too low also. When you're talking about the lunar tide, realize that the ground absorbs far more sound than does water. And water is colder than the ground, and you're going to have more of the sound projected. And if you're going to default and say, it's not going to happen this month because the winds and the tides don't align, so we're not going to do it, you're cheating the people that live there that have suffered through this in the past.
That's a good point, we understand that, but the thing is I think what it's saying, what happens if 3 or 4 months it doesn't line up? We're not getting the study done, that's, I think, it's, no one's trying to cheat anybody, it's just, if Mother Nature doesn't cooperate, then, you know, now we're dragging our feet because we're not getting the study done. I think that's, you gotta find the middle ground there.
We
That's
as
right.
residents in the past had the same issue with the Scituate Country Club that decided that it was going to conduct outdoor weddings with amplified music that was exacerbated by the lunar tide. And if we would have said, we can't wait for there to be an outdoor wedding and a lunar tide with the right wind, they'd still be abusing their position.
Okay, well, like I said, we'll look at that.
And the town moved against it and closed them down for outdoor amplified music weddings.
You know, I gotta say, given the number of residents complaining from Third Cliff, I tend to agree that we would have wasted all of our effort here if we don't have some study done when it's a high tide. So we should put that in the criteria. And if it doesn't happen the first or second month, you know, we'll talk about it, but
long as it's understood that Mother Nature's not working with us and we're not,
You're trying.
we're trying. That's all that's my point. To me, it's, you know, as you said, when it happens, but I just don't wanna be cited that we're trying to drag our feet, that's all.
And this sort of leads to the other question that I had about this, because, you know, it doesn't really say, and I was wondering, do we do this after we hire the contractor, as to which house we're gonna measure, and, you know, how many different locations there exactly are gonna be, and when we turn the turbine off, when we turn it on, do we leave that to the acoustician, or is that something that we should be putting in the RFP?
Well, with all due respect to my fellow committee members,
Yeah.
I tried to get that answer during our committee meetings, and I said, we brought in maps, we brought in where the complaints were. The only real input we got was in Sullivan's on high tide, and, you know, we couldn't get a consensus as to where people would be testing. And do we test, you know, towards James Landing, do we test only toward Third Cliff? I mean, you know, I brought in a list of all the complaints that have been received, that we've been able to tabulate from the Board of Health.
Yeah, I gave a list based on, you know, I get the complaints on the email, and, you know, I came up with some that were directional. I mean, I used people's names because that's how I associated the spots, but I had one Oceanside, one Third Cliff, then I didn't have a name, but I had a location further down on Moreland, and then I wanted to do James Landing, and I wanted to do McKeever, because, I mean, those were actual complainers.
Right.
And that's where the sound has to be the most for people to be upset to make the complaint.
Right.
Granted, we're not testing at North River Road, and we're not testing at Widows Walk, but we haven't had complaints from there.
Right, and I think you've just nailed two sites that are pretty easy. You can get out on the marsh at James Landing, and Fever agrees, having the testing done on the property. There's two nailed right there, so.
Yeah, you know, we had one.
Now, what they say, if they look at the topography and say this is the you know, best or worst case scenario, however, which side of the fence you're on, you have to go with their judgment.
Well, I think.
Like you said, where the complaints are, so.
Yeah, I mean, if that's where it's the worst and bothering the most people, then why wouldn't we test there?
Right.
Don't we put this in the RFP? I mean, it seems to me the number of locations and where they are gonna inform these contractors as to how they price it.
How many do we have, are we looking at 5 locations? I think 5 would almost, you know, just throwing it out there, I think 5 would be pretty good with 2 already named. You fill in 3 for the record.
Tom Thompson, 149 Gilson Road. Just a couple of points of clarification. The reason we really didn't get to locations, nor for that matter, make a final decision on potential acoustical engineers, is that the committee couldn't agree on scope. And the position of the community was and continues to be that the limited scope espoused by the wind developer and embraced by the Board of Health, and with the additional nuance of allowing the wind developer to develop their RFP, made it very, very difficult for us to want to spend a heck of a lot of time debating acoustical engineers or locations.
That was probably the last meeting.
Yeah,
That's
so
correct.
just to clarify that point, it certainly wasn't because the community didn't want to make a commitment on potential locations, nor I couldn't imagine anybody that's issued a complaint, albeit they've been ignored up to this point in time, but anybody that's issued a complaint or expressed any concern since this thing's been up and running would impede an acoustical engineer from being on their property to do a test. So, just for clarification, there's a reason why we never really got to the.
Are there any
point of
suggestions you'd have for location while we're talking about it now?
Well,
I mean, please throw it out on the table.
there's a list of properties that are the locations of complaints. I mean, I live at 149 Gilson Road. We experience,
You understand that we have a limited number, we can't.
I only have one house,
No.
and you can have mine,
Okay.
okay, that's one.
Well, fair
So-
enough, and that's what we're saying,
And I would-
you know, we can't do 50 of them, I think we're looking at maybe
No,
5 or 6
and
locations.
so, and I'm 3,000 feet away, and we enjoy the acoustical experience most evenings from 2 at least until 5. Actually, that would be the morning, and we know that because we're up. So he would offer our house as a location. I'm sure
That
that,
falls within the realm, Jennifer, then it is.
I'm sure there are others.
Yeah, Jerry, where are you on Moreland?
I'm directly across from the industrial reserve.
Yeah, but what's your
Are
address?
you on the river?
5-6,
Are you on the marsh side?
I'm on the marsh side.
On the marsh side, so I mean, and you're on Woolman too?
Yeah.
I'm right at the corner of Gilson and the Driftway, and the southern part of my property is perpendicular to Moreland, so I'm essentially, you can consider me at all 3.
But I mean, those 2 houses there on Woolman that stretch far enough apart that they're not, like, you're not next door neighbors.
I believe Mr. Kelly's approximately 1,000 feet from the industrial wind turbine. I'm approximately 3,000 feet from the industrial wind turbine.
Yes, that gives you a pretty good spread though.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, no, and that's, thank you. And especially with Mr. Kelly being on the marsh, it seems like a good pick.
Mr. Orenberger was Oceanside, I'm not sure which dock he is, but,
Mr.
He's on
Orenberger is a
Gilson.
little bit, he's on Gilson. He would be further north from my property, same side of the street. I think by his estimate, he's about 3,300 feet,
Maybe even here.
maybe a little further.
maybe here.
Well, I think we just suggested here, here, here.
In
Yeah,
Oceanside,
if you had
maybe
an ocean
here.
side, there's 5 right there.
3, probably 4, but shouldn't you go the outermost?
I'd like to be recognized for the floor, please.
Sure. Yeah, please speak.
My name's Jordan Kelly at 56 Moreland Road. Yeah, rather than the Orenbergers, I'd suggest the residents of David Doherty, who has committed so much of his life to working on this, if we consider it to be a personal slight.
He's further up north, right?
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is.
I had no problem with that, I think the only thing I remember talking, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, was the height elevation.
Okay.
Cause I'd
He
like
says
an
if we test in his
Oceanside.
backyard at 6 feet, it's not gonna get his second-story window, but you could confirm that with him. And I have no problem testing on his property, don't misconstrue it,
Yeah.
no problem, but I think that was a point he brought up. So, you know, if you talk to him, and like I said, that's, no problem here, there's no problem if he wants it done, and I totally agree with it, absolutely.
We've rocked out what looks like 6 locations.
Doing both high tide and low tide,
Well,
and the wind,
it's,
I mean, we've.
I would say the critical ones for high tide are James Landing and Mr. Kelly's property. I mean, not to exclude anybody else, but those, I think those would be affected by the tide the most.
well, I guess the question is gonna be, so we don't, we say we have 5 or 6, whatever it is, of these detection devices out there at a particular time, and we don't happen to hit high tide. Do we take 3 or 4 of them down and wait around, or do we leave them all for the next tide?
These are not 3 or 4 unattended
Right.
pieces of equipment. These are an acoustical engineer standing there, watching the meter, listening for extraneous sounds.
Right.
So while it's possible to do, you know, to the, hopefully I get it right this time, to the east of the turbine, you could probably do several locations on one night. And obviously, James Landing is the only thing to the west of the turbine that you're
That's
looking
right.
at. So if you have 2 sampling events there, you could probably do, you know, a high and low sampling event to the, high and low tide sampling event to the east of the turbine, unless you're going to say, well, I want, you know, one to the northeast, and I want one to the southeast, and I want one directly east, and it just,
Yeah, no, we're not gonna do that. I think it's gonna be oriented toward where most of the complaints are coming from. said, you know, you have the Keevers, which is right next door,
Correct.
and then the others are sort of spread out, most of them over towards the left. So, I guess what I.
Most of them will be on the cliff,
Yeah,
that's
so
where the
what,
testing
I
is.
suppose what you're saying is, maybe we could talk to, this is why I'm thinking it may make some sense to actually speak to these people before we hire them.
Well, we can give them an opinion and then they can give.
Yeah, they can give us some
Yeah.
feedback as to whether we need to have 4 out here at high tide, or whether 1 will give you the information that you need. I mean, presumably, if you get it, you have the 1 at the high tide, and it's higher because of the tide, which would be my guess, but we'll wait till we see, then presumably it's also gonna be higher at all the other points that you would be measuring as well.
Yes.
Just for the edification of those that are concerned about the study, what is the timeline for the RFP typically? And
I think we were gonna work that out a little bit tonight, because we gotta ask too, when it goes out and when it's gonna come back. Because I'm assuming you can't mail it out and expect an answer back by 2 days.
Well, I mean, just the blanks that are on this proposal is showing the RFP posted in March and the project completion in May.
one of the concerns is taking the ambient measurements before all the spring noises come out, the peepers and that type of thing, because that's gonna distort the test. So if it can
Be sooner than
be
later.
expedited, it would
Yeah.
probably be in everyone's best interest.
Yeah. No, I think this board agreed with that too, and I think we've been held up due to weather and other circumstances. I think ideally we said January, February, when it was coldest, would be the, again, best or worst case scenario to test, depending what side of the fence you're on, but that's out of our control too, with the blizzard and other stuff we had, so. Good point though, thank you, thank you.
It, seems to me, so we'll need to add to the scope the locations and the circumstances of the tide that we just discussed. It seems to me that, this is the 25th, in 2 weeks would be, no more than two weeks for our next meeting would be approve and post the RFP, unless you wanna have I think we can do it quicker.
I mean, if you've read through the RFP, except the dates and stuff, we basically, we've got what we've got, so. I mean, does it need to come back before the board to approve it, or
Well,
can
there's
we
no-
additionally approve
Well,
it?
we gotta look at the dates too, I mean, cause you can't, you've gotta put that in.
Yeah.
I mean, we can individually, if you agree those are the sites and that's the condition.
I would say proposed sites unless recommended different by the people that would.
Yeah, then that can be added. Gordon could send it to us, we could send it individually to the board members could individually respond.
Okay.
And then if everything's okay, then it just goes for as soon as it goes. I mean, we can put down a schedule of being no later than XXX,
Mhm.
if we
So
can,
let's
how
assume-
fast we can turn it
So
around.
let's assume we can turn that around this week. Okay, so post on March 4th, Monday, week from today, would be my suggestion.
That's the whole realm,
Then,
Move it.
yeah,
no, I think we wanna get it done,
sooner or later.
if they had started in March,
Yes,
I think we should do it. Yes,
What's the process for getting Board of Health sign off? I could make a proposal this evening, which is that we try to, we just take this one, and we'd send it out with a modification, that we'd want to sample 3 locations to the east of the turbine on high and low tide, and 1 location, probably at James Landing, at high and low tide to the west of the turbine, at these wind conditions. If that's acceptable, we could write that up and get that out. What I don't know for the timeline is, we have things in here for we've asked people to send us questions. Are those questions coming back to the Board of Health in a duly noticed meeting to be discussed and then responded to?
Right, that's what we're getting.
Now, do you
all that
think
takes
that
time.
would work in 2 weeks? Do you think we could have that back in 2 weeks?
I can ask for their questions to be back to us within 2 weeks, yes.
Yeah.
Not necess,
I
not
don't
the
know how quick
proposals.
those companies move. Some companies can move very slow and some are hungry and they're right on it, you know? That's why I don't wanna set something that's out of the realm, that's all.
Well, what you have is a deadline for questions, 2 weeks. We'd have a meeting, you prepare, we'd get them answers. Again, trying to get all this written and approved by the Board of Health as opposed to just discussed and then leave it to our judgment to get out. You know, we could get that back out, and that would go to all people who received the proposals and indicated interest in bidding, whether they submitted a question or not, everybody gets the same answers.
So if RFP posted on March 4th, deadline for written questions would be March 18th. Responses to written questions. I would propose that, let's see, when is our next meeting?
11. After that would be the 25th.
I would suggest that you ask for written questions,
Sooner.
whatever your deadline is for submission to the board before your meeting. Your next meeting's
The
18th?
11th. Next
Yeah,
meeting is the
it was
11th.
It's the 11th.
It's too
They'd have-
close.
They'd have a week to turn it around. We could have our meeting on a different date.
In a different place, probably.
This one's just
We'll
wrong.
find a place.
Yeah, we will.
So after the 11th, your next meeting will be the 25th?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks, right.
So if they get responses back to us by the 20th or whatever, they can be packaged up and sent to the board. And then we're gonna be discussed on the 25th. We get answers out
I'm
early
not
April.
opposed to having a special meeting, you know, just for this and still
Right.
have our regular meeting, so there's no problem there.
How about,
If we do that, just please check location so we don't crisscross.
how about deadlines for written questions, the 15th, Friday the 15th?
Is that enough time?
I can only ask. I mean, we're good.
If they need more, then they should tell us.
Yeah, we'll try to get this out before the 4th.
Right, they all have email, right?
Be reasonable, that's all I ask, be reasonable, you know.
So deadline for written questions, 15th. Answers to the written questions would be by the 22nd. I would propose we meet by the 20th. Proposals due the 29th, we'll do like March.
What's the usual time frame for this? Is there a customary time frame?
We normally don't go through this detailed a process. I mean, you're asking, getting an RFP out to 9 people. It's a little more cumbersome than we would pick up 2 or 3 consultants, ask them to give us a ballpark, and then we'd sit down and negotiate a detailed scope of work. We'd go differently.
I'm a beach guy, I gotta ask though, when do the peepers come out, when those, is that in April? About April, mid-April, starts getting warm. The leaves talk about May 15th, that's when everything kind of goes full bloom.
You gotta do it before then.
Wait for that.
Yeah, not just trying to. It says I'm a beach guy, but maybe just doing that some mosquito season.
And all you're gonna do is select a firm, you're not gonna select the wind conditions.
Nope.
Correct.
Or the-
Right, no,
And
and we
the-
understand that, and I think we've stated that that's out of our control, and, you know.
And what I would suggest is if that, whether it's a committee of the whole or a subcommittee, you know, be prepared to get the questions from people that are gonna project. They're gonna say, well, it's not quite high tide, it's gonna be 2 hours before high tide, and, you know, but the wind's gonna be right, and, you know, someone's gonna make these decisions whether they wanna go ahead or not. assuming you want to continue to be involved.
Well, I would at least want Jennifer to be involved in that process.
Excuse me?
I would at least want Jennifer to be involved in that process. And it may be that the questions aren't as hard as we think. So, and then she can make a decision as to whether you needed
All right.
the board meeting.
I'll be out working those nights too.
Do you think we'd be able to get this done by Friday?
What, the
The
RFP?
All right, so why don't we change it to RFP posted March 1st. The deadline for written questions is March 12th. Response to questions the 18th. Proposals due the 22nd.
Take it on the 25th?
And decision on the 25th, is that our meeting date?
Yep.
That's what I thought.
You planning to have people in and interview them?
I wanted to.
There's not enough time between the 22nd and the 25th.
No, it's a weekend. Well, there's nothing.
All right,
that
you
says-
could interview on the 25th, issue on the
Yeah.
28th?
Interview on the 25th, which is, we didn't put that in there. And, I mean, we could easily decide on the 25th. Yeah, right after the interviews.
Depends how many interviews.
Right, well, you know,
Yeah,
I would do no more than 3, but.
okay,
that's my thinking.
all right. It sounds like we may need another night for other stuff then. Mm.
Project completion May 1st.
Maybe gotta pray Mother
It's hard
Nature,
about the middle of the month.
Mother Nature cooperates.
I'm sorry, the date for the announcement of selected firm, you're saying is?
25th, interviews and announcements.
Well, I would say, shortly after the 25th. We may decide that we wanna have another meeting and we would then have that later in the week, but my thought was, my intention would be, if you agree.
I agree.
What Michael says is to interview them and then discuss it.
Well,
You've got all your notice requirements and postings and all that kind of stuff you gotta go through.
Right.
and, yeah, we would interview on the 25th, and the announcement would be sometime that week. That week.
Yeah, we might need to.
Yes.
So I would tell them there's anticipated there'll be 4 sampling events. 2 to the east, high and low tide, 2 to the west, high and low
When you
tide.
say 4 sampling events, you mean locations,
No, sampling events,
events?
the wind blowing from one
Right,
direction.
right, yeah,
3 locations to the east and 1 to the,
and the McKeevers.
in addition to the 3.
There's 3 on the cliff, 1 on, what's the name of the town down, James Landing, and the McKeevers.
We were talking about, we said,
And one more,
yeah, that would be
Darties.
Darties. If it's gonna be worth it, I think Mr. Kelly was gonna be gonna contact me, so
Okay.
one way or the other, but
well,
So do we have 4 up here?
when we,
1, 2, and then 4 up here?
yeah, 4 up there. When we talked to Neil, when we went to Darty, he's fine with testing it.
oh, he
There's
is,
no
absolutely is,
problem.
but I can remember him saying that if you test down low, you're not gonna get it, you gotta test like 20 feet up to a second story bedroom window. And that's my only hang up. I test anywhere, it doesn't matter to me, I remember him saying that, so, I'm fine testing there, I have no problem, but it was that
Well,
elevation.
we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, well, that's what I mentioned, Mr. Kelly, I think he understood what I was saying.
And it takes a while to set up and break down and do the 3 rounds of testing of on and off that's been proposed. 5 might be pushing it in one night.
Well,
5 locations. Plus, they're not all gonna be at high tide or low.
No, I think if there is not a high tide, and we should, you could put in a contingency, that I understand that you're gonna give to Jennifer a draft, put in a contingency that if there isn't a suitable high tide when doing the sampling event, then there will be a later, more limited sampling event at this location and this location during high tide.
And I think two of the high tide events are on.
And that would just probably be 2 locations, I would suggest 2 locations on it, but.
For the high tide, I think we could do James Landing and, Mr. Kelly's property, because they're both right on the water.
We should go the other way too.
Yeah, and those are gonna definitely be 2 different nights unless the wind shifts 180 degrees.
Right.
And if a front comes through, I don't know, but, that's opposite sides of the compass.
Not likely at this kind of wind speed.
Yeah. But I think those are ideally the high tide conditions, and I would almost suggest a high tide of 11 foot plus. That gets it over the marsh.
So how many on the?
What was it today?
Well, today was probably a 12, but that was storm generated. That was a good tide today.
I noticed.
Yeah, they're only supposed to be, I think, in the 9s.
Again, how many do you have to the east? Aside, in addition to McKeever's, how many? 4? What you're hoping for?
And the 4 up here is like 10, what we're saying, so.
4 or 5, 6 altogether.
6 locations.
Right, but I'm just trying to figure out one night, so one night we I mean, you're gonna be sampling, you could probably do McKeever's either way because there's not that much.
Right.
To the east of the turbine, you could pass McKeever's, you want 4 locations.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I would say McKeever's is kind of centralized, and then you have one to the west at Kingsland. 4, 5, 6.
Hopefully no fires that night.
Does it make, Mr. McKeever, does it make a difference in your view as to which way the wind is blowing, as to how the noise is? No? Okay.
The higher the wind speed, the louder the machine is, and, when it's blowing like southwest, it's not as loud all the time.
Okay.
Tell us the worst case scenario, I mean, we'll do the best we can to,
It doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter, okay.
I'll look at Mrs. McKeever's
Logs.
emails and see if there's any general pattern.
Yeah, and I would, as we talked about earlier, just on paragraph G, just change the language a little bit to put in that whoever it is that we select will be agreeable to both Scituate Wind and the Board of Health.
We got a plan.
Question?
So,
Yeah, no?
because of the process here, do you want me to redraft this, email back to Jennifer
Yeah.
for any additional comments? Jennifer, try to get me comments by Thursday, we'll try to get it out Friday.
Done.
We'll try and get it before Thursday.
Sooner you get to me, the sooner I'll get to them, the sooner I'll get back. And you guys will read your emails.
Okay. I think that concludes our discussion for this evening, continued with our RFP. But Oh, excuse me, we got one more comment?
Just one quick comment, and then I think we're done with it. So, just for the record, I had directed a letter to Ms. Sullivan, last week on a related matter to this, so just, we'd like to have standing to be able to discuss that further when next we meet at the Board of Health, so. So we can
Okay.
just make sure that we're on the agenda
Yeah.
for that would be
You
appreciated.
realize we need to put things on the agenda before we can officially discuss them.
That's why I bring it up.
Letter, but thank you.
That's why I bring it up, and we'd like to be able to be on the
Yeah.
agenda for that next meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you for your patience.
No, not totally, this was obviously a full agenda this evening, so.
Thank you. With that said, we're good, we're where we are, so we'll close that discussion, but continue it on as we move forward. But you guys are more than welcome to stay. We have a little other business to attend to on our agenda, but that concludes the wind discussion on the turbine. So, thank you.
Here, I want you guys to look at this is the storm form.
Okay. Oh, okay, I got you, very simple, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, intact and whatever else, and, yeah, like we said before, we don't wanna fail somebody for having a cesspool if it still works and the ownership and stuff. Make
Yeah.
sure the pipe's still going to the cesspool.
Yeah, it gives us some basic information, and it's totally has to do with the, with the actual system condition.
Gotcha. And that's perfect, because we don't wanna,
No,
anybody go more than.
no, we don't wanna make
We
it
don't wanna go
expensive,
health
and
issue.
we wanna make it quick,
Okay.
so.
Thank you, and so, all right, we had our director's storm report, and you're set with that, we didn't cut you off for the wind turbine, we're good. We can move right in.
No, I expect that we will have a more definitive after-action report after groups of us get together. The chief's trying to put it together now, but we're all still busy with reports and paperwork and.
Seemed like, from what I heard, things, everybody performed thumbs up.
Well, we all,
Always room for improvement, but
well, that's just
Getting
it.
involved.
We want to be able to improve. We've improved every time we've set it up, and we wanna keep doing that, so.
I'm gonna move along to discussion, possible vote on condemnation at Townway Extension, number 46 and number 48.
Right.
Okay, Jennifer.
Sorry, you guys had to listen to all this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, we're easy compared to that. Come on, this'll be a piece of
Are
cake.
you really?
Not really.
If you're so easy, then how come I didn't get any reports from you in a year?
My name is Sarah Marianne, I own 46 Townway Extension. Looking for leniency and some compliance to that. Our last correspondence was in June of 2012 regarding, obviously you know this is somewhat of a unique situation on Peggotty Beach with my house. We did not have access to our homes until after July 4th, and I closed my house in September 1st. So in that very short period of time, it was very difficult for me to get much of a response from the several people that I contacted on the list of engineers that was provided to me. And consequently, I've hired this gentleman, Brent Watts, to help us out with some creative environmental engineering solution to this problem. I live in Vermont. I drove 5 hours to be here. And I've learned a lot about wind turbines. So obviously, I'm very interested in complying on, the best way that we can.
Jennifer, why don't you tell us where?
Okay, Mr. Slocum was in contact with me several times, the last time being in the fall, with promises that didn't materialize in anything.
Hold on a second, please.
And today, Phil Spath called me from the beach saying they're there, looking at it, and it failed. I feel like putting somebody on the agenda to get results, but, what Phil was saying was that they would probably be looking at something like a tight tank. Now, granted, we had a storm surge tide today, but I was down there and the water was going underneath the building. I mean, that's much too close for any kind of septic system. Phil didn't say whether it was existing or non-existing, but, I don't know, he just said it failed, so they're gonna proceed with some kind of repair, which is what we want it to be, is we want it to be environmentally safe and whatever.
I gotta
Now,
ask you
now
this.
that, wait a minute, the other complication here is, after, I don't know, Irene, I think, or Sandy, the poles, power poles in the water went down and were removed. So there's no power down on that beach now. It's my understanding that the power company is negotiating for private easements with the owners to put the poles back up, but I have no concept of time frame here. And I don't know what that's gonna do to complicate a solution.
So that means if you have a tight tank, you need an alarm on it, and if you have an alarm, you need electricity, and if there's no electricity, we can't have a tight tank.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, tight
Yeah,
tank
I
is
gotta
a
ask real
solution
quick.
because it's seasonal.
I gotta ask quick, is this number 46, is this the one that sticks out?
No, he'll get the wrong.
No, you're talking about Slocum's, I'm not Slocum's, that's
We're-
48, I'm number
we're
46.
Yeah, but, I mean, there's two of them. So, I mean, they're both in the same situation.
Predicament, yeah.
So, I mean, Ms. Moran wanted to just forego the inspection and just go to the repair, but nothing happened. So, you know, I had nothing from either party until today. So, I mean, this is progress, which is nice, but unfortunately, there's this additional monkey wrench that none of us thought about or even conceived that would happen.
The power thing.
Yeah,
The one thing I just wanna say is, you understand that it's a public health issue if the septic system's not working and it's a public beach. So that's what we're trying to fix, it's not singling out or.
No, I get that.
So we're not trying to punish or anything, we just don't want sick people at the beach and polluting our beaches. So please understand that, it's try not to be hostile in any way, that's not the intent here.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just go a little bit more on Ms. Moran's, what she said. I'm Brent Watson from Watts Engineering, we're based out of Duxbury. It hasn't been, the correspondence, if you look in the file, it's been very cordial, and I think the property owners have always been of the mind to bring it up to compliance. Although not purview to the board or to the staff, you know, she has interviewed and gone to a number of engineers who haven't necessarily followed through on what, and done that. And obviously, she doesn't deal with septic or these type of issues all the time, and being outside of the, you know, Scituate, 5 hours away, coming down here to show that it's something that she wants to comply with. It is a seasonal cottage.
Thank you, sir.
It's only used, you know, 30 days, not continuous, it's not a rental. It's a family-owned and continuous ownership for 90 years. So it's not something that, you know, it's purposely ignored or understands the importance of what we were trying to accomplish here. We don't, I think, overall, we're not trying to have any type of contention, and we're trying to move towards compliance. If I could, on a technical, speaking as an engineer, you know, there's a lot of solutions that have generators, that have battery backups. You go to places like Scituate down in Plymouth, there are a number of tight tanks, there's a number of alarm systems that work off batteries, that work off solar power. I think, my understanding is that eventually there'll be commercial power there. But there are a number of ways we can work an engineering solution that are alarmed and that would accomplish what we need to. So,
have you heard anything from them on the power situation?
I've spoken to them several times. Up until last week, it was pretty much a canned response. We're assessing the situation, we're assessing the situation. After Sandy, took down the poles, they just literally severed them, put our wires on our decks. Thursday or Friday, I spoke to someone, they said they were sending along requests to their supervisors, and they said they were waiting on the town of Scituate to give them access to the road. And it was quote unquote, open the road up to you, when the town of Scituate, and that's been kind of, my initial correspondence from you was last January 18th. Nobody could get to the house to actually do anything for me. You know what I mean? That's part of the problem is that you ask people to do something, and if they can't access it, and they aren't necessarily familiar with Inner Harbor or have anyone to ask to be able to access the property, it becomes a, hey, how much effort can I put into something I can't get to? So again, this is the gridlock here you have with National Grid. They're like, well, you have a right to have power, but the town of Scituate owns the road, and until they let us get to the property, we can't.
All
The
right.
problem now is the road is in the ocean almost, isn't it?
Well, that's just it. The thing is everybody's been using not the road, but a just agreeable right-of-way.
Behind the,
Being good neighbors,
Yeah.
but it's not a legal access, I
Right.
guess that's what it
It
is.
hasn't been a road there for.
Yeah, I mean,
Probably 4 years.
Yeah, we can't fight Mother Nature.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Barry Beach, it's
Right.
its role, and that's,
right.
So are they saying that they're never gonna put anything in because there's no road and there never will be?
They're waiting to hear from the town of Scituate on when they're gonna open the road, and is that
All
Al
right.
Bankert? Is that,
It's Al Bankert,
Yeah.
yeah, but let me talk to Al, because there may be,
and
I'll
what
talk
your
to
use of
Al.
houses too, that's interesting in Duxbury, I mean, I've spent some time out in Sagebrush, there are some great,
creative.
very creative,
Yep.
and
I mean, the
I've
house
seen some
is
stuff that
structurally
amazes
sound.
me, quite neat, and, I mean, I think that's great. You may find out you don't even need the electric company out
Mhm.
there.
Yeah. I mean, for the
Especially
minimal
for your
use.
use, you're only out there in the summer.
Not even, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm pretty busy.
60 days.
you're actually,
That's
you're missing the best time here,
Yeah.
September and October are
Get that cute little career in my way, but.
Yeah. Excuse, yes,
Do you
please.
take public comment?
Yeah, we can, I don't have a problem with it, just gotta,
Yep. Mark Fenton at the
Yeah.
NPON 25 Crescent Ave, so nearby neighborhood. I'll just remind the board that you don't necessarily, there is some urgency to resolve this in the sense that there were a half dozen people in surfing in that water today. So Peggotty Beach is not just a summer beach, and I full sympathy for the landowners and the property holders, you know, that there was a real challenge there. But I think the board does have an obligation to act with some haste, or, you know, with your purview, the public health in mind. So I know you're fully attuned to that, but it's not just a summer access water area.
Yeah, but these are just summer houses, because there's no heat in them.
No, I understand that. I meant from the standpoint of contamination.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
that, you know, sort of the
definitely,
issue
yeah.
is not reserved to that time when you expect to see sunbathers on the beach.
Yeah.
Contamination is a problem year-round, given that that's a fairly active area.
There's no power, there's no functioning septic system, there's no one living there, right? All
Correct.
grades go hand in hand.
The system hasn't been operational since August.
Okay.
I mean, nobody's been, it's operational, but there's no leachate in it.
Yeah,
so it's
right.
not operational, it fails.
And do we need to say anything officially that no one can be in the house until this is resolved?
Well, that was something I was gonna bring up, that, I hope you understand that condemnation, it does legally say that, and to uncondemn it would be to come to some compliance with the septic, and we've done this in the past where once things are done, then Jennifer has the authority to undo that immediately, so it's not another process. We try to do it as quick as we can. I think we had one with some pipes broken, heating system, and we had a tenant, and I think we were very good about making sure once the building inspector gave a thumbs up, you gave a thumbs
Yeah,
up.
he had an access problem plus pipe problem.
It's an ugly word, but it's something the town legally we have to do, because if there is an issue, it can't come back this way, so, you know, I hope you
I mean,
understand that, too.
do you think the time frame is good that you can get it up and running before the season.
Oh,
That's the intention.
yeah,
but,
that's,
Would we qualify for an abbreviated Title V, like you had mentioned earlier when you were talking about the earlier storm review? You said there you had gone up to other parts in town, and some of these people were gonna be able to have an abbreviated Title V review because of the imminent damage caused by the storm.
Well, I already waived that
Okay,
for
oh, I
her
was-
because she
okay.
wanted to go right to the repair. She said, well, let's not even mess with it, let's just go right to the repair.
Oh, okay.
So,
If you're in favor.
You're there, are you, okay, I understand.
Yeah, you already feel.
Yeah.
And also too, with existing dwellings, I mean, the board has granted many variances in the past, which we're probably gonna do for this. And we've seen some alternative systems and some stuff, and it'll be interesting to see what your idea is, because it may help someone else in the future.
Yeah,
You're not the only property, and I'm sure next big storm, someone else is gonna be sitting.
There
in that
will be
chair.
more.
There'll be more, exactly.
Right.
Exactly, and it's just unfortunate of
that's,
where we are on the coast.
yeah.
yeah, I guess, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I mean, the agenda docket says discussion. You know, in our mind, we would like to have it more towards the discussion than the condemnation. We're not obviously gonna use the property until the summertime. Pending, you know, continued communication with the board, and sending some type of, you know, deliverables. It would work better with the homeowners if we could just keep it as a, moving in that direction versus the condemnation.
Like I said before, I think it's just an ugly word, but it's something that this board may have to do. I mean, I can only speak for myself. But
Well, I mean,
I see what you're coming from, and I
Well,
can
my
think of
hope-
the other person said the same thing, and like I said, it's just an ugly word, but it's something that sometimes has to be used.
well, the other question, that I have, it's a bigger question, is what are we gonna do with the whole road that doesn't have power? I mean, granted, they're not year-round, but, you know, it's most, at this point, some of their systems are not in question, because we've fixed them already. But, you know, what am I gonna do with it? I mean, it's a town question, really, because we've got emergency access and everything else we're gonna have to worry about. I mean, I've gotta get to Bangor and see what he's gonna do with about a road or access or right of way or whatever it is.
Realm here, but,
Yeah.
will they end up doing a taking out the backyards or something, or ask for easements?
The town at one point went forward and asked everybody about moving the road from the front to the back. And people said no. So the town was stymied, they couldn't do anything.
Well, might have
Now,
to
whether
re-
the people's opinion has changed,
might have to
I don't
revisit
know.
it, yeah.
If they look at the beach now, I think their opinion will change if they wanna get to their house, because the front road is,
It's gone.
you know, yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah. That's why they took the poles up.
Right.
I mean, the poles stood where the road was.
Some of them were.
Yeah.
Of course,
The pole
yeah.
stood in the water.
Right, but that's where the road was.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, if you can guarantee us there won't be any occupancy till it's, and you put it in writing, that until it's, we approve an operable septic system, I suppose it would be work,
We've done that before too.
yeah.
I think that's a agreeable venue. I think that's, you have no plans to occupy it before the summer? No, I think.
And when do you think you'll be able to come back with a plan?
We were talking outside, we said 2 months at the outside, but I think we can move faster than that. Our biggest,
For a plan or?
for the whole, I think, our biggest thing is getting a strong price. Really, the plan, it looks like we're moving towards a tight tank, which is not, you know, the largest engineering solution, apart from the controls. We wanna be able to get a really competitive bid, and that's what we're trying to allow for. Okay, we're not up against a deadline, so.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying you have to have it built in 2 months, but I would like to, when do you think you get a plan in?
Forward progress.
A month at the outside, is that?
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
what
good,
that-
that's good,
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah, the March.
Because again, we have to rely on heavy equipment getting in there. accessibility.
Not
Not for the plan,
Right.
but
Yeah.
to have it
Yeah,
constructed,
yeah.
the actual
Yeah.
construction
Yeah.
pieces.
But you need a
that-
plan so you can go get your numbers anyway.
That's
your
right.
prices.
We have our end of March hearing, March 25th.
Oh, you don't have anything on that night?
Yeah, I know. Can we go first?
Can we go first?
I'll put you first in front of Turbine. Okay. I promise. We would like to see a plan by the 25th.
And we need that letter of,
Yeah, get me a letter today, you know, sign it for, you know, notarized or something saying that you will, you know, you'll proceed with fixing the septic system and will not occupy the house until a approved system is installed and signed off on.
yeah, and at some point, if we get closer to the summer, then it may have to turn if something doesn't happen, then, yeah, legally, we'll have to condemn it.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, no, we appreciate you, the board's understanding, and as I said, there's been progress, not, prevalent, you know, seen by staff. And so it's getting, actually, you know, out of state is hard to sometimes manage and understand
No,
the code.
We've got your attention and we've got you now.
Oh.
Card, please.
You know, I.
Card,
some of the
please.
card. I'll get you, I'll send you.
I
a
got
contact.
some of these here, get out of jail free.
And smiles and stuff. I'll forward my contact, I forget the contact.
Okay. Even on the town website, hit Board of Health, you'll get me.
How I found out we were here tonight.
But I do, if I could just, you know, there is no public health, Mr. Fenton mentioned that there is no, from our system, potential to contaminate the water at this point. Is that what I just wanted to.
And why is that? I'm sorry.
The system works as a gravity flow system currently. And so without somebody feeding it, some resident putting water into the tank that then goes through the system, there is nothing that's fed.
So as long as there's no inflow, nothing's being
Right.
pushed out.
Correct.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
No problem. I'm a surfer too, so I can appreciate it.
It used to be.
So that's number 46.
That's number 46.
46.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What's number 48?
Oh, that's the Mr. Slocum, the one that Phil Spass working on,
Okay.
so.
So we're not gonna do anything further on that?
Well, Phil's gonna, well, I'll give Phil, relate to Phil the same,
Same instructions.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you give me a letter and we won't condemn it, if you don't give me a letter, we'll condemn it.
You wanna come do that tonight?
Yeah.
So that house is basically in the same position as this one is?
Oh, God, yes.
Okay, because we were down at the properties, and we parked in the town parking lot and hiked over today, and
Did you wear boots?
actually did it right in these, it's nice firm sand, see, it's all been washed over.
No,
It's
I'm
nice.
talking about the parking lot, cause it was
Yeah,
full of
the
water.
Oh, yeah, the parking lot's still a little mess.
Well, it's on
Yeah.
you'll be, you may be glad to know that they're looking at fixing that this year, or raising it
We
above.
gotta bring it up again, when they brought it up the last time.
Well, you know, it's one of those things, you know, Mother Nature has its way of going with the wave, so we'll try again. They've actually had it in the beach fund this year, so
There we go. So we're good,
we're good with that.
we're grounded on that, all right.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We should put Phil after the wind turbines.
There you go. Yeah, we waited our turn.
Yeah.
There you
Thanks.
go. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good luck.
Thank you.
I have to cruise you.
Yeah, same spelling.
That's the extension.
I've talked to Drew, he called.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, and we live on town way, but my husband's been down there 90 years, what, 86?
Yikes.
So it's still all that time.
Yeah, that's great, that's great. Thanks.
Let's go, kid.
He looks just like his father.
He's the health
We're
commissioner.
getting there.
He's the health commissioner in Queens.
Is he really?
Drew Shield, yeah. That's her son, but she's, I think, the niece.
Well,
Yeah, well, I saw Drew said something about it, something once that when we were at a meeting, and I went back and I looked at the Shield. Oh, yeah. In a nosy bookstore or something. Okay, town meeting discussion.
Next on the agenda.
Thank you, I will be taking my vacation.
You're welcome.
I don't know what her concern was, but, okay.
Well, there is gonna, is Mr. Kelly's, item gonna be on the,
Yes, well, there's two,
So,
there's,
yeah.
yeah, well, there's two schools of thought, okay. Number one is there's 41 items on the town meeting agenda, she thinks it's gonna be 2 nights.
yeah.
The first article that's a possibility would be for them to put a hold on our budget, to add money to do these studies. And then the other one would be the citizens petition, which I think is to close it down and do studies. I'm not sure, I haven't seen the writing of it yet. But what you might wanna do is email her and ask for the information of the citizens petition regarding the wind turbine language. See what the language is, so that'll give you a better idea.
Well, we should plan, since you are gonna be on vacation, I mean, we should plan
Well, the March 25th meeting,
if, what is town meeting again?
Just layer it on.
9th and the 10th of
We may be having
April,
more than one meeting that week,
or the week before.
yeah. So, it's the 9th and 10th.
With the town meeting, Wednesday, date night.
Hey, nice move getting out of that trial front.
No,
I go, timing's everything.
yeah.
Close, sort of close to the,
Yeah, I thought it was gonna bring me right through to June and then I wouldn't have to worry about it. So March 25th and town meeting's the 9th
in town.
and 10th. Oh yeah, there it is on my calendar already. So would we have a, I don't think I've got Board of Health in my calendar anymore. The 22nd. Oh, yeah, the 10th. So that can't happen, because that's gonna be the second day.
Yeah,
So you're right, the 25th is, and you're gone the first week in April.
yeah.
Okay.
But the first night back, we could do it like the Monday night, and then the town meeting's Tuesday, Wednesday.
That's probably a good idea. I don't know, so why was the Board of Health meeting moved to Wednesday the 10th, because we thought town meeting might be on the 8th?
Because originally it was that Monday.
Yeah. So why don't we move, should we vote, do we need to vote that or anything? Why don't we just move,
We just
just
gotta
set
set
the
the
Board of
agenda.
Health back to the 8th?
Yeah, that Monday.
Yeah.
Is that?
As long as
anything on that?
Carol hasn't already done it for conservation.
Well, we
I
can
know,
have it.
she's opposite us anyway.
Yeah, but the thing is even if she, we can find another meeting place, and it doesn't, if it's just gonna be on town meeting itself, then it doesn't have to be a very long meeting.
Right, okay.
But, I mean, as I said, I don't think we're not discounting any of the health complaints. Our problem is standards, and we don't feel, we think it's a new industry, we think information will be evolving, and that, at that point, we will probably be, we've authorized a post-construction study in accordance with the DEP accepted standard. We acknowledge that it was a standard set before the industry existed. However, it is the only standard available. And one of our problems with flicker and/or health studies is, while we could gather more information during a study, we do not have a solid standard by which to measure, as well as some of the studies do not supply adequate epidemiological information to make a causation determination. And we don't think it's a town's purview to do studies to do and fund scientific studies, that is meant for other entities.
You'll have to put that in,
I'm just gonna stand up and say it.
Oh, no, are you gonna stand up and say?
I know.
You know, I can give you cue cards, but I'm not saying.
Yeah, just if you can, you know,
Yeah, I can write it out. I mean, if that's what your opinion is.
that's basically what you had.
That's what I told you before. I
Or,
said,
yeah.
if you agree with that and you want that to be your position, fine. If you have other things you wanna say, fine, I don't
Right.
care.
No, I think if you could put that down, that would work. I could make it without mine anyway. That's the least.
I mean, do you have anything more you wanna think
I'd
about?
rather discuss it as the wind turbine topic, but I think you know what I think.
Mm, yeah,
You know, like, some of it is troubling, but how expensive a study is gonna be to do something like that, I don't think they have any idea
no.
to do a full-fledged.
Shutters would be
A
cheaper.
full-fledged FE study would be
Yeah,
a very huge undertaking.
yeah. And, I mean, and someone can do a study that's gonna counter it at some point too. I mean,
But I would like to see, what the proposal is, would be interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Right. I gather that's, so that, any other issues that may come up for us?
I hope
Okay.
We're not there yet.
I'm juggling so bad now, it's not funny. My goals are going down the tubes because I'm doing all
It's
this.
been a busy winter. Usually winter is supposed to be a little,
This is supposed to be the
downtime.
quiet time when I'm
Yeah.
caught up on
Especially in the
stuff.
coastal community.
I'm not catching up on anything, I'm
That's
getting
fair.
buried.
Yes, last item, administrative review, sign invoices.
We're all set with the invoices, cause I saw you all at different times before.
Yeah. Right. Nothing further?
I think with that, we could close.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's gonna be a late dinner.
Hey kids,
Right.
Charlie Matheson, WATD.
Oh, sure, how you doing, Russ Clark?
Hi.
And whatever.
Russ, hi. Frank, right?
I'm Frank, yeah, well, Francis, if you wanna sue me. That's my legal name.
I'm gonna just pick on the chairman.
That's fine. I'm not insulted.
That works for us.